June 12, 1963. Pleiku Highlands, 6:41 a.m. The air is already thick with heat, even this early. Captain James Jim Holloway, U.S. Army Aviation, tightens the strap of his helmet as he climbs into the cockpit. The smell hits first: fuel, oil, sweat, hot metal. Then the sound, a rising whine. Not artillery, not small arms. Rotors. The UH-1 Iroquois shudders beneath him as the engine spools up. The vibration passes through the seat, up his spine, into his teeth. Every pilot learns this feeling. The Huey never lets you forget it's alive. Outside, infantrymen crouch low, rifles held tight, eyes tracking the sky like it might betray them. This is not how wars are supposed to move. Not like this, not vertically. Holloway glances at his co-pilot. No words are exchanged. They don't need them. The door gunners slap the feed tray closed. A thumbs up flashes. The rotors bite harder into the air. Then the ground lets go. The helicopter lifts, awkward at first, then suddenly free. And the jungle drops away beneath them. In seconds, they are above the tree line, moving faster than any patrol ever could on foot. This is the moment. The moment the Vietnam War stops being fought only on the ground. Before the Huey, war here moved at the speed of feet. Columns of men hacking through jungle, slowed by mud, rivers, heat, exhaustion. Operations planned around what could be reached, not what needed to be taken. Time belonged to terrain. The helicopter changes that equation instantly. Now, soldiers can appear where no road exists. Now, wounded men can be gone in minutes instead of hours. Now, commanders can think in terms of reach instead of distance. From the cockpit, Holloway sees it clearly. The jungle is no longer an obstacle. It is just something you fly over. The landing zone comes into view. A crude clearing hacked out days earlier by machetes and explosives. Smoke grenades bloom red against the green canopy, marking the spot. Holloway lowers the nose. The Huey descends fast, too fast. Automatic fire erupts from the tree line, sharp, rising cracks. Tracers arc upward, lazy but deadly. Someone yells over the intercom, "Taking fire!" The helicopter shudders as rounds snap past the fuselage. One clangs off the skid, another punches through the tail boom. Holloway doesn't pull away. He commits. The skids hit hard. Infantry pour out, boots slamming into mud, rifles up before they even clear the doors. The Huey is on the ground for less than 30 seconds. Then it lifts again. Lighter now, wounded men aboard. Blood already soaking through ponchos on the floor. This is the bargain the helicopter offers. Speed at a cost. Back in Saigon, generals watch maps light up with new possibilities. Air mobility becomes doctrine. Units are reorganized around helicopter lift capacity. Entire divisions are redesigned to move by air. The war accelerates, not because the enemy is weaker, but because America can now choose where and when to fight. For the first time, commanders believe they can force contact. The Huey makes that belief feel real. Operations are planned like chess moves. Insert here, extract there, leapfrog valleys, cut off escape routes, strike fast, strike deep. The helicopter becomes the backbone of everything: medical evacuation, resupply, command and control, assault. If it moves by Huey. And for a brief moment, a dangerous moment, it feels like the war has been solved. The enemy feels it too. Viet Cong fighters hear the rotors long before they see them. The sound is unmistakable, a chopping thrum that grows louder, closer, unavoidable. They learn quickly. Helicopters mean contact. Helicopters mean troops. Helicopters mean firepower arriving from the sky. But they also mean predictability. Landing zones must be clear. Approaches must be shallow. Hovering makes you vulnerable. The jungle listens, and it remembers. By 1965, Hueys fill the sky. They streak over rice paddies, hover above mountain ridges, skim rivers at treetop height. Some carry troops, some carry wounded, some carry nothing but the scars of previous missions. They are everywhere, and they are never invisible. Pilots start naming their aircraft, painting doors, hanging Lucky Charms in the cockpit. Anything to make the machine feel personal. Because every flight feels like a gamble. Captain Holloway survives his first tour. Many do not. The casualty lists grow quietly. Aviation units absorb losses at a rate few outside the cockpit fully understand. Helicopters are not armored like tanks. They survive on speed, altitude, and luck. And luck runs out. Yet still, the Huey defines the war. Its sound becomes Vietnam's soundtrack, for soldiers and civilians alike. Children look up when they hear it. Farmers pause in the fields. Fighters melt into the jungle. The helicopter is power, but it is also exposure. It announces itself. It cannot hide. It demands air superiority and constant fuel, maintenance, parts. It gives America reach. It also gives the enemy something to aim at. Years later, Holloway will try to explain it. How the Huey made everything possible. How it saved lives that would have been lost. How it carried men into places they never would have reached otherwise. And how it made the war faster, without making it shorter. Because the helicopter did not change why the war was fought. It changed how long it could last. The Huey did not end Vietnam. It stretched it, vertically, relentlessly, in every direction at once. And once the war moved to the sky, there was no going back. By 1965, the helicopter is no longer an experiment. It is policy. At Fort Benning and Fort Rucker, manuals are rewritten almost as quickly as they are printed. Entire concepts of warfare, once theoretical, debated in classrooms, are now being tested daily in Vietnam's skies. The phrase air mobility enters the military vocabulary with unusual speed, not as an idea, as a necessity. November 14th, 1995. Ia Drang Valley, Central Highlands, 10:48 a.m. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Hal Moore, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, grips the map inside his helmet as Hueys stack overhead in tight formation. Below them, the jungle waits, dense, deceptive, indifferent. This is the first large-scale test. Airmobile infantry inserted directly into enemy territory, miles from any road, supplied and reinforced entirely by helicopter. No retreat routes except the sky itself. Moore understands the risk instantly. If the helicopters fail, there is no plan B. The Hueys descend into landing zone X-ray one by one, each aircraft exposed for seconds that feel like hours. Door gunners fire into the tree line as soldiers leap into elephant grass taller than their shoulders. Then the rotors lift again and leave them there. Within minutes, North Vietnamese regulars attack in force. What follows will become legend and doctrine. Helicopters shuttle reinforcements into the fight while others pull out the wounded. Casualties are evacuated under fire. Ammunition is dropped from hovering aircraft. Commanders adjust positions based on aerial observation relayed in real time. The battle is brutal, but the concept works. The helicopters keep coming. When Ia Drang ends, the Army draws its conclusion quickly and dangerously. Air mobility works. Not partially, not situationally. Decisively. The Huey is declared the centerpiece of modern counterinsurgency warfare. Divisions are reorganized. Budgets shift. Procurement explodes. Thousands of helicopters are ordered, shipped, assembled, and flown into Southeast Asia. By the late 1960s, Vietnam becomes the most helicopter-dense battlefield in history, and the war speeds up. Operations are no longer constrained by roads or rivers. Battalions leap from one hot zone to the next. Search and destroy missions proliferate. Enemy contact becomes frequent, often sudden. The helicopter allows American forces to force engagement. That is the promise. Find the enemy. Fix him in place. Destroy him with overwhelming firepower. Lift out. Repeat. On maps, it looks elegant. In practice, it becomes something else. The Huey does not just deliver soldiers. It reshapes decision-making. Commanders become accustomed to rapid insertion and extraction. Time horizons shrink. Engagements are measured in hours instead of days. Pressure increases. If helicopters can reach anywhere, then why wait? Why not respond immediately? Why not chase contacts deeper? Why not exploit every sighting? Speed becomes expectation, and expectation becomes risk. Pilots feel it first. Missions stack back to back. Maintenance windows shrink. Aircraft fly damage because replacements are needed now. Aviation units rotate faster than infantry. Fatigue accumulates quietly, invisibly. There is no front line in the air. Every flight is exposed. Every landing zone is a potential trap. The enemy adapts again. North Vietnamese commanders study Huey tactics meticulously. They learn approach angles, rotor wash patterns, insertion timings. They position machine guns where helicopters must slow. They dig in near likely landing zones. They time attacks to coincide with lift schedules. The helicopter has made the battlefield vertical. The enemy learns to fight vertically too. By 1967, helicopters are being shot down with alarming regularity. Not by chance, by design. The jungle begins to hunt the sound. When rotors echo through valleys, fighters do not flee, they prepare. Yet still, the doctrine hardens. Air mobility is no longer questioned. Because it works, tactically. Wounded soldiers survive who would have died in earlier wars. Units avoid annihilation by lifting out. Commanders maintain control over sprawling operational areas. The Huey saves lives and demands more. As the war expands, so does dependence. Fuel convoys multiply. Maintenance units swell. Airfields sprawl across the countryside. The helicopter requires infrastructure, and infrastructure creates targets. The war becomes louder, more visible, more complex, and more expensive. What no one fully admits yet is this: the helicopter has not shortened the war. It has made it manageable, and manageability is seductive. As long as troops can be inserted and extracted, as long as casualties can be evacuated quickly, as long as commanders can respond rapidly, the war feels containable. Even when it isn't. By the time the Tet Offensive looms, the Huey has become more than a machine. It is a symbol of reach, of rescue, of American presence, and of a war that can now appear anywhere, at any time, without warning. The sky has become part of the battlefield, and soon it will betray the limits of speed. January 23, 1968, Quang Tri Province, 6:41 a.m. The fog is thick enough to taste. Captain James Hollister, U.S. Army Aviation, leans forward in his seat as the Huey shudders slightly, rotors biting into damp air. Below him, the jungle is a gray blur, tree lines bleeding into one another, rivers disappearing into mist. Visibility is poor. That makes everyone nervous. Because when you can't see the enemy in Vietnam, doesn't mean he isn't there. It means he's listening. The Huey's sound arrives long before it does. A low thrum, then a chopping echo, then a vibration that travels through leaves, soil, bone. The helicopter announces itself to the jungle like a warning flare. By 1968, everyone knows this, especially the enemy. Early in the war, Viet Cong units scattered at the sound of helicopters. The assumption was simple. Air power meant death from above. That assumption did not last. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong commanders began timing helicopter arrivals, counting seconds between first audible contact and touchdown, mapping habitual landing zones, watching patterns repeat. Helicopters brought Americans quickly, but they also told everyone exactly where Americans were going. Hollister's aircraft begins its descent. Below, an open patch of ground clears into view, a probable landing zone, flagged by smoke from an earlier insertion. Infantry units are already on the ground, spread thin, weapons raised toward the tree line. The door gunner scans left, then right. Nothing. That's worse. As the Huey drops altitude, the fog lifts just enough for Hollister to see movement, not rushing, not chaotic, but deliberate. Too deliberate. The first burst of machine gun fire slams into the fuselage before the skids even touch. The aircraft jerks violently. Warning lights flash. Someone screams. This is the new reality. The helicopter is no longer a surprise. It is an invitation. By 1968, North Vietnamese doctrine has evolved around helicopter warfare. They do not chase helicopters. They wait for them. They allow insertions to complete. They let troops move off landing zones. Then they strike, knowing extraction will come. And when extraction comes, helicopters must hover, must slow, must expose themselves. That is when they are killed. The Huey's greatest strength, its ability to pause, hover, maneuver precisely, becomes its greatest vulnerability. Rifles become machine guns become heavy-caliber weapons. Rocket-propelled grenades appear in numbers. The jungle grows teeth. American commanders notice the losses. They record them meticulously. But the logic of air mobility is already locked in. To abandon helicopters would be to abandon the entire structure of the war. So, adaptation is layered onto dependence. Gunships escort transports. Landing zones are softened with artillery. Approaches become steeper. Hover times are reduced to seconds. Every solution increases complexity. Every layer adds weight. Pilots absorb the consequences. Flight hours skyrocket. Maintenance crews work through the night. Aircraft fly with patched armor, taped wiring, cracked plexiglass. Crews give names to their helicopters, because naming something makes it feel less disposable. And because everyone knows not all of them are coming back. The psychological toll accumulates quietly. Pilots learn to recognize ambush patterns by instinct. Too quiet, too open, too perfect. Some abort landings without explanation. They are usually right. And still, the helicopters fly. Because when infantry units are pinned down, surrounded, bleeding, there is no alternative. The Huey remains the fastest way in, and the only way out. By late 1968, the battlefield has transformed. The war is no longer fought just between units. It is fought between systems, a system of mobility versus a system of patience. One built on speed, the other on endurance. The enemy does not need to stop helicopters. They only need to make them costly. And cost accumulates in aircraft, in pilots, in confidence. When the Tet Offensive erupts, helicopters respond exactly as doctrine demands. They fly constantly. They evacuate the wounded. They insert reinforcements into cities never meant to see combat. They are everywhere. And that visibility, once reassuring, now tells a different story. The war is no longer distant. It is airborne. As the smoke settles after Tet, American leadership begins to understand something unsettling. The helicopter did not make the war shorter. It made it possible to continue. And in doing so, it removed pressure to resolve it. The Huey is still flying, still saving lives, still carrying men into danger. But the question no one dares ask yet is already forming. What happens when the machine that keeps the war going becomes the reason it never ends? February 12th, 1969, Tainan Province, 9:18 a.m. The clearing is barely wide enough. Tall grass flattens under rotor wash as two Hueys descend in staggered formation, their shadows flickering across mud and broken branches. The air vibrates violently, snapping leaves from trees, driving dust into every open eye and mouth. Staff Sergeant Robert Ellis, 25th Infantry Division, braces as the skids hit ground. Go! 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 Men spill out in practiced bursts, boots sinking into wet soil, rifles sweeping outward in arcs they've rehearsed 100 times. The helicopters lift immediately, banking hard, engines screaming as they claw back into the sky. The entire insertion takes 12 seconds. That speed is the point. Before helicopters, this operation would have taken days, marching through jungle, crossing rivers, exposing columns to ambush after ambush. Now, it takes minutes. The war can reach anywhere, and that changes everything. American commanders quickly realize the deeper implication of air mobility. It does not just move troops faster. It reshapes geography. Villages once considered remote are suddenly reachable. Base camps appear where maps once showed nothing. Enemy sanctuaries shrink, at least on paper. There is nowhere the helicopter cannot touch, which creates the illusion that there is nowhere the enemy can hide. That illusion proves dangerous, because helicopters allow American forces to skip terrain, but they do not control it. Units arrive suddenly, fight violently, then leave just as quickly. The jungle closes behind them. The enemy returns. The war resets. Search and destroy operations become routine. Infantry units are inserted into suspected enemy zones, sweep aggressively, call in firepower, extract. Body counts are logged. Weapons are captured. Villages are questioned. On reports, operations look decisive. On the ground, they feel temporary. The helicopter enables this cycle. Speed replaces permanence. Mobility replaces presence. The war becomes a series of sharp punctures instead of sustained pressure. And punctures heal. Soldiers notice first. They fight hard for hills that are abandoned days later. They clear villages they never see again. They secure landing zones that exist only long enough for helicopters to leave. Morale bends under repetition, not from fear, from futility. Pilots sense it too. They fly the same valleys, land in the same clearings, evacuate the same kinds of wounds. The scenery changes, the pattern does not. Yet helicopters save lives in undeniable ways. Medevac crews pull wounded men from places no vehicle could reach. Minutes matter. Blood loss slows, survival rates climb. The Huey becomes a symbol of mercy as much as war. Its sound, once terror, becomes hope. Dust off incoming. Those words mean someone might live. This duality becomes the helicopter's curse. It makes the war more humane for individuals and more sustainable for the system. As American casualties decline due to rapid evacuation, political pressure eases. Losses are still reported, but fewer funerals follow. The war feels manageable, which makes ending it harder. Enemy commanders understand this with brutal clarity. They adapt again. Instead of trying to destroy helicopters outright, they aim to shape behavior. They force insertions into predictable zones. They harass extraction points. They stretch response times just enough to increase stress. They don't need to win engagements. They need to keep Americans moving. Moving means burning fuel. Flying means maintenance. Maintenance means supply chains. The helicopter war is expensive, and time favors the patient. By late 1969, American leadership begins asking quieter questions, not about whether helicopters work, they do, but about what kind of war they make inevitable. A war of motion, a war without fronts, a war without closure. The Huey has erased distance, but it has also erased endpoints. There is always another landing zone, another insertion, another extraction. The machine keeps offering solutions, but none of them look like conclusions. In Washington, analysts review maps filled with helicopter symbols. The coverage is impressive. The progress feels abstract. And beneath the data, a troubling thought emerges. If helicopters can keep this war going indefinitely, then what will ever force it to stop? The Huey does not answer that question. It only lifts again. Rotors spinning, heading toward the next clearing. June 3rd, 1970. Ashau Valley. 4:56 p.m. The Huey comes in low. Too low. Captain James "Red" Mallory knows it the moment the tree line doesn't fall away fast enough beneath the skids. The valley is narrow, walls rising steep on both sides, jungle packed so tight it looks solid. Rotor wash kicks up leaves, dust, fragments of broken branches. Then the first crack snaps through the air. Not random, deliberate. Mallory banks instinctively. The Huey shudders as rounds punch into the fuselage. Warning lights bloom across the instrument panel. The aircraft lurches, loses lift, regains it unevenly. Below, muzzle flashes flicker from hidden positions, spider holes, camouflaged bunkers, firing angles rehearsed patiently for this exact moment. The enemy has learned the sky. By 1970, helicopters are no longer a surprise. They are expected, predicted, plotted. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army study flight paths, insertion patterns, altitude preferences. They map landing zones the way Americans once mapped trails. The sky has become terrain, and like all terrain in Vietnam, it can be trapped. Ground fire intensifies. AK-47 rounds arc upward. Heavy machine gun bark from deeper positions. RPGs streak past rotor discs in terrifying near misses. Helicopters are fast, but they are not armored. They bleed. Mallory fights the controls, muscles screaming, sweat blinding his vision. "Hold on," he shouts, to his crew, to the aircraft, to himself. The Huey claws upward, barely clearing the ridge, trailing smoke. Behind him, the valley swallows its silence again. Another insertion aborted, another lesson learned. Losses mount, not catastrophically, not decisively, but relentlessly. Each helicopter lost costs, trained pilots, experienced crew chiefs, time, confidence, and most importantly, momentum. The enemy does not need to shut down air mobility entirely. They only need to make it expensive. Every hot landing zone forces hesitation. Every ambush delays extraction. Every downed helicopter becomes a media moment. Burning wreckage, scattered gear, bodies carried away. The symbolism cuts both ways. American commanders respond predictably. Gunships escort transports. Firepower increases. Landing zones are softened with artillery and airstrikes. The sky fills with noise. But noise does not equal safety. Helicopters remain vulnerable during the moments that matter most. Approach, landing, liftoff. The seconds when speed disappears. The seconds the enemy waits for. Pilots feel it every mission. Hands tighten on controls, eyes scan tree lines obsessively. Every shadow becomes a threat. Fatigue sets in, not from flying, from never relaxing. The psychological cost spreads. Infantry units hesitate as well. Insertions feel rushed, exits feel fragile. Confidence erodes, not in the machine, but in the permanence of anything accomplished. They arrive, they fight, they leave. and the enemy is still there. At higher levels, doubts grow louder. Helicopters have given America reach. But reach has not produced resolution. The enemy absorbs losses, rebuilds, adapts, always adapts. Strategists begin to realize something deeply unsettling. The helicopter has made the war technically superior, but strategically elastic. It stretches, it contracts, it refuses to break. What was meant to dominate the battlefield has instead locked both sides into motion. An endless exchange of landings and withdrawals, strikes and dispersals, noise and disappearance. The war does not advance, it oscillates. In after-action reports, success is still measured. Sorties flown, troops moved, wounded evacuated. The metrics are impressive. But the horizon remains unchanged. The Huey keeps flying. Because it must. Because stopping would mean admitting that speed alone cannot defeat patience. That technology cannot compress time enough to outrun belief. By the early 1970s, a quiet truth has settled over the conflict. The helicopter did not shorten the war. It reshaped it into something survivable, into something indefinite. The machine that once promised decisive mobility has become part of the stalemate itself. A symbol not just of American power, but of American entanglement. The rotors keep turning, the war keeps moving, and the end remains just out of reach. April 18th, 1972, Quang Tri Province, 6:11 a.m. The Hueys arrive before the sun fully breaks the horizon. Their silhouettes cut across the low clouds, rotors slicing through mist, heavy with the smell of rain and cordite. Below them, South Vietnamese troops cluster along a muddy embankment, rifles hugged close, faces drawn tight with exhaustion. Captain Thomas Keller, U.S. Army Aviation, has flown this route so many times he no longer checks his map. He knows it by memory, and that terrifies him. The helicopters descend in staggered formation. Gunships flare ahead, rockets ripping into tree lines where intelligence suggests enemy movement. The jungle responds with silence, which is worse. By 1972, everyone understands the rules. If the enemy is quiet, he is not absent. He's waiting. The Hueys hover, skids inches from the ground. Troops jump, mud splashes, rotor wash flattens grass, engines scream. Then they lift again, fast, sharp, practiced. In less than 2 minutes, the landing zone is empty, except for footprints, and the echo of rotors fading into distance. This is Vietnamization in motion. American helicopters delivering South Vietnamese forces. American pilots flying, American mechanics maintaining, American logistics fueling, American presence without American boots, at least in theory. On paper, it looks elegant, efficient, transitional, responsible. The helicopter makes it possible. It bridges withdrawal without collapse. But Keller feels the truth in his gut. The machine hasn't reduced American involvement. It has repackaged it. The Huey keeps Americans connected to the war, even as policy insists they are leaving it. Pilots still die. Crew chiefs still bleed. Aircraft still burn. Only the headlines have changed. In Washington, the language is careful. Drawdown. Transfer of responsibility. Supporting role. But the sky over Vietnam tells a different story. It is still crowded. The enemy notices. North Vietnamese units adapt again, focusing fire not on American troops, but on the connective tissue of the war. Aircraft, supply routes, logistics hubs. They understand that helicopters are not just machines. They are arteries. Cut them, and the body weakens. SAM sites begin to appear farther south. Anti-aircraft fire grows heavier, more coordinated, more confident. The sky grows hostile. Keller feels it on every flight. Altitude becomes dangerous. Low-level flight becomes lethal. There is no safe band, only trade-offs. Each mission requires more planning, more suppression, more risk. And still, the helicopters fly. Because without them, the war collapses too quickly. That realization settles heavily on commanders. The helicopter was supposed to accelerate victory. Instead, it has become the only thing preventing sudden defeat. Extraction becomes as important as insertion, not just tactical extraction. Political extraction, reputation extraction. The slow, careful removal of presence without triggering panic. In April 1972, the North launches the Easter Offensive. Conventional units, armor, artillery, a different kind of war. And suddenly, helicopters are everywhere again. Evacuating wounded, moving reserves, patching holes faster than roads ever could. The machine adapts once more. It always does. But something has changed. The helicopter no longer symbolizes momentum. It symbolizes containment. Holding lines, stabilizing crises, preventing collapse. The war is no longer about winning ground. It is about not losing face. In Saigon, civilian eyes track helicopters with mixed emotions. Hope, fear, resentment. They mean help. They also mean dependence. For American pilots, the emotional toll deepens. They are flying more dangerous missions for less clarity. Risk without resolution. Sacrifice without certainty. Keller lands at a forward base as dusk settles. The Huey skids sink into red mud. He cuts the engine. Silence rushes in. Around him, helicopters sit lined up, scarred, patched, aging. They look tired, like everyone else. The Huey has done everything asked of it. More than asked. It has moved armies, saved lives, extended wars. And now, it is being asked to do something impossible. Carry a superpower out of a war it helped keep alive. The rotors will keep turning, because stopping would mean the illusion finally breaks. And no one, pilot, general, or president, is ready for what comes after the noise fades. April 30th, 1975. Saigon, 5:03 a.m. The city is already awake, not with traffic or commerce, but with waiting. Waiting for instructions, waiting for permission, waiting for the sound everyone has been listening for, consciously or not, for years. The helicopters. Major Robert Jenkins, U.S. Marine Corps, stands on the roof of the U.S. Embassy compound, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes fixed on the eastern sky. His uniform is rumpled, stained with sweat and dust. He has slept maybe 2 hours in 3 days. Below him, hundreds of Vietnamese civilians press against the gates. Some clutch documents. Some clutch children. Some clutch nothing at all. All of them are looking up. The first Huey appears as a dark shape against the gray morning. Then another. Then several more. The sound rolls across Saigon like thunder. Not sudden, not violent, relentless. For more than a decade, the Huey meant arrival. Reinforcements, supplies, extraction from chaos. Now it means something else entirely. Finality. Operation Frequent Wind has begun. The last evacuation of the American war in Vietnam. And once again, it will be helicopters that decide who leaves and who does not. The irony is unbearable. The machine that once promised control now symbolizes surrender. Not a military one, a temporal one. Time has run out. Jenkins watches as embassy staff guide evacuees onto the roof. They move quickly, but not calmly. There is no calm left. Each landing triggers a surge forward. Hands reaching, voices breaking, bodies pushing. Marine guards form human barriers, their faces tight with something between duty and shame. The Huey lands. Rotor wash explodes across the rooftop. Papers fly, hair whips, tears vanish into wind. The crew chief leans out, shouting instructions that no one can hear. People climb aboard. Some are pulled, some are lifted, some are forced back. Jenkins knows the numbers. He knows the capacity. He knows the schedule. And he knows that none of it will be enough. Below the roofline, Saigon is unraveling. North Vietnamese forces are closing in. ARVN units are dissolving, not always in defeat, sometimes simply in exhaustion. Years of dependence on American mobility have left gaps no one can fill. When the helicopters leave, the glue holding the system together evaporates. This is the final consequence of air mobility. It allowed South Vietnam to function in ways its infrastructure never could support alone. And when it goes away, so does the illusion of stability. Jenkins boards a Huey on the third rotation. He takes one last look at the city. Smoke rises in distant districts. Sirens wail without purpose. Crowds swell and scatter. It looks like every other moment of crisis he's seen here. Except this time, there is no follow-on force. No next wave. No tomorrow. The helicopter lifts. The embassy shrinks. Saigon recedes. Out over the South China Sea, the deck of the USS Midway is chaos. Hueys land one after another. Pilots climb out. Refugees disembark. Crewmen gesture frantically. And then something unprecedented happens. Helicopters are pushed overboard. Perfectly functional aircraft, dumped into the ocean to make room for more arrivals. The ultimate symbol of excess turned into disposable debris. The Huey, once priceless, is now expendable, just like the war it carried. By nightfall, the rotors slow, then stop. The sky over Saigon goes quiet. For the first time in years, there's no American sound above the city. No reassurance, no intervention, no delay. The war does not end with an explosion. It ends with absence. In the years that follow, historians will debate the helicopter's legacy. They will argue about whether it prolonged the war, whether it saved lives, whether it trapped America in a conflict it could not exit cleanly. All of it is true. The Huey changed Vietnam by shrinking space and stretching time. It allowed the United States to fight longer, farther, faster. And in doing so, it postponed the reckoning. But machines cannot solve political contradictions. They can only delay them. When the rotors fell silent, reality rushed back in. Borders reasserted themselves. Roads mattered again. Distance returned. The war, stripped of its machinery, ended the only way it could, on the ground. In time. The helicopter did not lose the war, but it made it possible to fight one that could not be won. And when the last Huey vanished into the horizon, Vietnam finally belonged to itself again. For better, for worse.